What is up? Welcome to the College Football Print Factory Show. We're breaking down this college football slate. And Bruce, I'll talk to you first. You've said it. It's an interesting college football weekend, so I'm excited to get kind of some of your feedback. And it's not as good as the next 2 weekends. I'll call that out. I've looked at the schedule. If you're gonna go pumpkin picking this weekend, Bruce, this is the weekend, not the next 2 weekends. Okay, so don't go pumpkin picking or anything or don't do it this weekend. Don't do it next weekend. I checked the schedule. I wanted to double check. I saw someone say that this was the weekend, and I said, let me check just to see. And all the good games are the next 2 weekends, like Ohio State, Oregon. There's a lot of good ones. So I'm excited for the next 3 weekends. It'll be a lot of good football games, but this will be a nice little appetizer leading to the next 2. But Bruce, how are you doing?
Good. Yeah, it's always good to take your soulmate pumpkin searching. It's a good little thing around here, especially I saw people getting them set up and ready to go. So yeah, spooky season is upon us, and yeah, this week is it's kind of a weird slate. I kind of mentioned it to you before the show started. A couple really good games, and running back spot is tough this week, so we'll get into that a little bit. But we have a slate tonight too, a nice little 4-gamer. We had 2 games, 2 game slate last night. It went really well, so looking to carry that over into the weekend.
Yeah, the slate actually tonight is pretty fun too. And here's the games next weekend, just so people can know. Mark your calendars: Bama, Tennessee; Georgia, Texas. I know Bruce will be watching that one. Miami, Louisville. That's next weekend, and then the weekend after, there's Missouri, Alabama. So that's obviously a great game. There's Oklahoma, Ole Miss. That'll be a fun one. There's a lot of other ones in there that I can't find right now, but there's some good games coming up the next weekend. But Bryce, I'll go over to you. How are you doing? And you said you're gearing up for tonight's slate, so it sounds like you like tonight's slate, and I'm sure you'll be diving in deep on Saturday as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a much better weekend for like fantasy college football than it is for like actual games. Like,
yeah, that's fair.
I mean, it's pretty hard to beat. Like, Bama, Tennessee is going to be a really entertaining game, I think. So, yeah. Georgia has a tough schedule this year. I didn't realize that they were playing Texas and Bama. So that'll be a good one for sure.
Yeah, I mean that's something you merge the conferences a little bit. So that's I love it. I'm super excited about how college football shaping out. The playoff is going to be super fun. Bruce, actually, just we're here talking. What is the schedule for that playoff? Do you know how they're doing it? Like once they get deep into like December?
Man, I haven't dug into it enough to look at it, but yeah, it's going to be.
I was just curious. How much hell it was going to give us doing content, right? Like in that late December stretch, how tough it was going to get. So, but hey, that's okay. We'll love every second of it. But let's look forward. Let's look at this slate. Obviously, we got some nice prize pools. I saw there's a bunch of qualifiers. So if you're looking to get in those, dive into those. There's a big $20, of course. And we'll be breaking down all of the games, and we're going to kick it off with a pretty good one. Our guy Vip will be excited about this one. It's Missouri and Texas A&M, which is definitely a really, really good game. Brady Cook, I have not rostered him much this year. Definitely rostered him a lot more last year. Got Luther Burden. He's 8.4K, which is an expensive tag. But, hey, it's a big slate. We might be able to fit him in there. Weiss Jr., 6K. Definitely another option that you could use. And, of course, that run game for Missouri. You can always mix in Noel and Carroll. On the opposite side, you got Moss at 5.5K, which he's felt a bit pricey throughout this season, at least when I've looked at everything. That price feels a little bit better on him. I know Noah Thomas, he was an absolute hero for me last weekend at 3.8K. That's a really cheap price tag as a value. So, and then we got the quarterback situation. Is it Reed or Weigman? Bruce, why don't you give us the insight on that and break this game down?
Yeah, he'd have to be an idiot to start Wigman this week. I think Reed has just looked so good, and he's only 6,200. He's going to run, averaging 10 rush attempts per game against a decent Missouri defense, but it is at home, and we like rostering quarterbacks at home. So I think he's a solid play this weekend at only 6,200. That's much too cheap. Brady Cook, you said he's not been great this year. And he had some comments about Texas A&M's home field saying it's louder at practice. So some fighting words there. So be interesting to see how loud that crowd is and how it affects Missouri this weekend. Nate Noel, I think, is a solid play at 6K. He's going to be owned. It is a tough rush defense for Texas A&M. So I don't know how much I'll get of him, but it is a really lean running back week. So I have a little bit of interest. You mentioned Noah Thomas at 3,800. I think he's a great play, along with Jabri Barber at 3K as well. He made the 3K shitter list already. I've already made out the playbook and got 6 targets last week and plays in the slot. So pretty safe to see that amount again. I like him. And, I think it's pretty easy to fit Burden in if you go cheap at running back. So I think he's a solid play as well.
Yeah, Bruce, you mentioned the 3K shitter list, which is on our playbook over at Run Pure Sports, where it just mentions the guy, if you're trying to jam everyone in, these are the guys that, hey, they're not the greatest projections, but hey, they definitely have the ceiling to get there if you want to really jam a bunch of really good studs in there and take a shot on a low-owned play. Also, Bruce, is it a weekend like last weekend we talked about it? It felt like a lot tighter salary cap. Are you noticing the salary is tighter where you need a lot of those 3K guys, or is it a looser week?
Yeah, it's a little bit looser. The quarterback spot's a lot. There's a lot more value guys there. Last week we played Sawyer Robertson there, and that kind of opened things up for a lot of people and allowed you to jam the studs. So yeah, I think it's a lot looser this week. It's not like that NFL kind of build that it felt like last week.
All right, Bryce, I'll head over to you. This game obviously is going to be a fun one to watch, but will it be a good DFS game for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's like the best game, but you have some pretty cheap, underpriced players in this game. I think Reed is a pretty solid option for 6.2. I don't see how you don't start him. I agree with Bruce here. Texas A&M kind of looked dead in the water before he started getting going. So, I expect him to, even if Connor's healthy, to maintain the starting job here. Cook to me it's too expensive and not the best matchup. I'd much rather go to Noel here or Burden kind of as one-offs if you're looking to get exposure to Missouri. Don't love either player, but they both have enough upside even against a good defense to get there. And, you're not breaking the bank with Noel. And, Bruce said, I think there's plenty of value this week to get to someone like Burden in your team. We've got plenty of cheap players here that we'll get to. And I think one of the better ones is Noah Thomas here. He saw a bunch of targets last week. 3.8K is just too cheap for him. We will have another cheap receiver that I do prefer to him on this slate that we'll get to in a bit here. But I think it's viable to go double cheap, and then, you can pretty much do whatever you want with the rest of your team. So he would be my guy for A&M. I don't really want anything to do with the A&M backfield. I just really haven't been impressed with Moss much this year. And, with Reed in, he takes a lot of the rushing upside away from him, in my opinion. So I'm likely going to fade the A&M backfield here.
Yeah, another thing about Noah Thomas, too, keep in mind, Reed hasn't been playing. I mean, he's been there most of the year, but obviously he's starting to pop off, and maybe Reed just leans on Noah Thomas for the rest of the year, right? You just never know if he thinks that he's the guy for him. And hey, 3.8K is too cheap for the upside that you saw. I know I had him last weekend. I'm going to have him again. I think he's a really strong play. So I like that you brought up that value. Just not a lot of guys at 3.8K that can get the job done. Next game up, we got BC and Virginia. Also want to give a shout out to myself for getting Derrick Henry wrong the other night. You are right. Cough buys. I was completely wrong, but that's what's going to happen here sometimes on these shows. We're going to take our stands at Run Pure, and we'll be right or we'll be wrong. But BC and UVA, that's the next game up, and definitely a fun game to talk about. I think. I mean, Castellanos, he runs a ton. If you look, yeah. Besides the one game where he had one rush attempt where they won 56-0, and it wasn't a competitive game. 14 attempts, 13, 15. I mean, he's gonna run around a little bit. Will he be able to get the job done against this Virginia defense? We'll have to see, but I don't think it's a terrible game to take some stabs on. You got Lewis Bond there. He's a guy that can show some upside at 4.5K. Bruce, why don't you dive into this one for us?
Yeah, I think Castellanos is interesting. You just gotta make sure there isn't any crazy world events, because Castellanos loves to do things when things aren't right in the world. So possibly possibly has a big game tomorrow if there is any. So make sure you're watching the news. I like him. I think he's been banged up, but the rushing attempts are way up there. So you love to see that when rostering a quarterback. I think Robichaux, the running back for BC, is interesting at only 4,200 with this Virginia rush defense not being that great this season. So I kind of like him. He got 60% of the snaps last week, 63 actually, and he's a big back, can make some plays. So I think he's in play a little bit as a cheap running back. And then the wide receivers here, Malachi Fields is priced crazy high, so it's tough to get him. But Terrell Harris should be back. He's 5,800. Big play receiver, may get some get a bunch of snaps there. Lewis Bond and Skeet are both cheap for BC, and they're both solid receivers. So I might have some of them in tournaments as well. Just because they're good values and can make tons of plays on the field the whole game. So against a bad defense. But yeah, mostly this game is going to be pretty bad outside of those value guys, and Castellanos I like quite a bit.
All right, yeah, and Bruce, the Phillies play the Mets on Saturday, so you can parlay it with Castellanos did a home run as well if there is a catastrophic event. But,
there we go.
We also got Derek in the chat. Happy to have you here live. If you guys could too, hit that like. I believe this show's free. So, hey, if you hit those likes, maybe the show will stay free for you. But let's go over to Bryce. This game has a 52.5 total, Bryce. It's a close spread with Virginia, -1.5 here. I think it's a game that we're going to have some DFS interest in. Maybe not our favorite game on the slate, but what's your overall takeaways here?
Yeah. Overall takeaways, this game's overpriced. Like as a whole, both quarterbacks I think are too expensive. They'd be tournament only plays for me. Running backs to me, kind of seems like a mess. Both backfields are pretty split, and both quarterbacks like to run. So I don't have tons of interest in the backfield, to be honest. Receiver, I'm not playing Fields at 8.6K. It's just kind of tough out there. The one play I do like in this game is Lewis Bond at 4.5K. I think that's too cheap on him. And, I would prefer him straight up to Noah Thomas. I think he's a better floor play. I think they have pretty much the same upside, but yeah, I like Lewis Bond here, and, kind of deeper tournament plays for me on the rest of them. There are other games I would rather target with spending salary.
Let's see if this is a game you'll target, because I think this one is definitely one that I know I'm going to target. SMU and Louisville, 56.5 total, and I think there's some pretty good plays here in this game. We've talked about Shao, and Show, I forget what it is. It's Shao, right? Is that how you say it again, Bruce? We talked about this last week.
Yeah, it's Shuck.
Yeah, sorry, Shuck. That was it. I messed it up last week. Yes.
Close
so Mr. Shuck. Yeah, close enough. We'll take that. But he's not the guy I want to talk about. I think he's a great option to pair with the receivers, but it's the receivers I think are really the conversation on this team. Obviously, I think we've all been fans of Ja'Cory Brooks for most of the season, and he's been an absolute monster, putting up 15 or more DK points in his 4 games. But there's also value here to like in Lacey, right? Lacey was definitely a play last week that we talked about on the show. If he's going to be healthy, and he was healthy and he got the job done. And I think there's a lot to like here on this Louisville side of the ball. If you go over to SMU, there's definitely some plays here. Obviously, we talked about running backs and Rashad Smith. Against TCU, he put up 46 DK points. So clearly there's a ceiling there to break the slate. And I think he's going to be one of the running backs you talk about here, Bruce. But the question is, can we afford him? And is that stack viable for SMU and Louisville?
Yeah, this game should be great. The total looks great. Everything else looks great. The only way it slows down is if Louisville kind of controls the pace with the run game, but they don't run it enough to to control the pace. So they're going to be slinging it all over the field on Saturday, and they should be able to. I don't love this SMU pass defense, and it is at Louisville's field as well. So I like Shuck a lot. I think 7K is too cheap for him here. You have you have the ability to pair one of 3 receivers with them that are all too cheap in my opinion. Brooks, Lacey, and Bell all are way too cheap here. Lacey in his first game back had eight targets last week, and I just think that's crazy. He should be a 5-6K player. Last year on South Alabama slates, he was like 8K. So I think he should be up there. He looked good last week, so I don't mind going back with only a $400 raise in price there. Chris Bell also is too cheap. He's playing most of the game, and he played 90% of the snaps last week, and he's explosive. So I think he's way too cheap. Roderick Daniels for SMU is 3,900. He played some running back last week, and kind of rotated in there with Brashard Smith. If LJ Johnson's out again, I think that's a solid play. Isaac Brown started at running back for Louisville, and he's cheap, 4,300, along with Donald Chaney. I think both of those guys are the 2 running backs they like the most. And you mentioned Brashard Smith. He's 7,800. Snaps kind of decreased last week. I don't know if he got banged up. I watched the full game between them and FSU the other night, and I saw a lot of Daniels in there at running back too. So I don't know if they're just trying to keep him healthy. But yeah, it's a little scary for a $7,800 player that only got 35% of the snaps last week. So something to watch. But yeah, the receivers in this game are way too cheap.
All right, let's head on over to you, Bryce. You talked about a value receiver, and I'm wondering if it's Lacey. So is he the guy that you're looking at here on Louisville? And what's your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I don't see how you fade him at 3.4K. This game is way too cheap as a whole. I mean, I like Brooks at 6.3K. I think you can go double. Shuck is too cheap at 7 for me as well. Louisville game is going to be kind of condensed ownership around like those 3 players, though, especially Shuck and Lacey. So, like, if you want to get different, like playing the Louisville running game, I think is a pretty solid way to get different. I prefer Brown. Chaney's 3.1K though. So, if you need a 3K shitter, I think there's definitely worse plays on the slate, and it gives you some leverage. So I like that. From the SMU side, Smith seems a little too pricey to me. I would rather take a shot on Jennings here, but it's just a much harder game to play. My favorite receiver for them would be RJ Maryland. They kind of spread the ball around a lot in this offense, and I think he's the best bet for safety and upside here. But I mean, you guys can play pretty much any of these SMU receivers. It's just kind of thin after Maryland, in my opinion. They would be tournament only plays for me for sure. But I'd probably say Hudson if I had to choose. And yeah.
All right, let's go on over to the next game, and it's a banger. 64.5 total. It's Pitt, it's UNC, and priced up with the running backs Hampton and Reed 8.3 and 8.7. I'm sure we're going to use some of our salary on those options. We also got our guy Eli Holstein. He's averaging a lot of fantasy points this year. He's been a monster, but he's expensive at 9K. It's a great spot. This UNC defense is a disaster. So is Pitt. This is a game that's clamoring for a ton of fantasy points. And I think a lot of people are going to be looking at some of these receivers. But we got to figure out, how do we nail down these receivers, right? There are so many options. There's Mumfield. There's McCullen. There's Jones. You got Kobe. You got Pop Williams. I mean, Nesbitt. There's so many options that we can go to, Bruce. So obviously talk about the running backs and the quarterbacks who are a bit priced up, and then figure out these receivers for us, because there's a lot to roster.
Yeah, this game is definitely, if it's not the best, it's up there with another we'll talk about here in a little bit. Pitt is off a bye week. They were off last week, so they definitely are well rested here. Desmond Reed at 8,300. He didn't play the game before the bye week, so he should be good to go. But something to monitor is 8,300. But This UNC defense is terrible. They should be able to score as many points as they want. We've played this offense against way better defenses, so it should be a fun game for Pitt. Rodney Hammond is also back for Pitt. He was going to be the starter going into the year, and he's a good running back. It'll be interesting to see how much work he gets, and he's only 3K. So if we get word that he's going to play, I think he could be a good 3K shitter option as well. Omarion Hampton's going to should be the most owned running back on Saturday. 23 carries per game, 3 targets per game. He's a stud. He scored a touchdown in every game, has 6 on the year. He's going to be tough for Pitt to stop. So I think he has a big game. It is at home as well. Holstein is probably the best quarterback on the slate, I believe, even though he is 9K. His receivers are too good. They're going to be chucking the ball. So Mumpfield, Poppy Williams, Kenny Johnson, one of our favorite guys that we've got wrong every single week. All those guys are in play. And on the North Carolina side, Nesbitt, J.J. Jones, those are the top 2 guys for me. Both are cheap, under 6K. I always like John Copenhaver. He's 3K. He's on the 3K list as well. Plays 80% of the snaps, lines up in the slot 53% of the time as a tight end. So he's interesting too. Just a ton of good plays here because there's going to be some points here for sure.
Yep, tons of points are going to be scored. And if tons of points are going to be scored, I'm sure Bryce is looking at them in his cash games. And honestly, I think you have to consider, I know it's college football, but you could consider making a rule of having at least one of these guys or 2 in your lineups. But it's a good slate. There's a lot of options we can get to. But Bryce, what's your thoughts here on Pitt and North Carolina?
It's pretty hard not to see points in this game. Any way you look at it. I mean, worst case score here seems like a 21-20 game, and that's the absolute worst case. I mean, this is probably like a 38-35 type of shootout here. I don't really see either team stopping each other. The running backs are priority 1 for me here. Hampton and then Reed in that order. As Bruce said, it's pretty hard to get away from Hampton on this slate. I like running back a little bit more than Bruce this week, I think. So, it's more about taking up running back spots for me. But yeah, I'm not going to fade Hampton here. So he's going to be in pretty much all my teams. Quarterback, I think Chris Wells is a decent option to get different, just in a super high game scoring environment. No one's really going to play him because everyone's going to take Hampton. So I kind of like that play. That being said, there's runners that we like that a little bit more, like Holstein. Holstein's quarterback 2 overall for me on the slate. I just can't put him ahead of Milroe personally. Even Milroe coming off a big game last week, kind of a look ahead spot for Bama here, and kind of worry about his playing time, but we'll get into that game in a bit here. Pitt passing game is pretty interesting to me. I'm not really seeing crazy ownership on any of these guys, and I'm more than willing to go back to Munfield, Williams, or Kenny Johnson. I think Kenny Johnson's a really solid pivot off of some of this other cheap receiver chalk at 3.9K. So I think he's cash viable. I think you can play him in tournaments. Carolina passing game receivers, I would rank it. Nesbitt is kind of the guy I'm looking at here, but you can play a decent amount of these guys as they spread the ball around a bit. So I think you definitely want exposure to this game, and I don't hate your rule of having at least one guy in this game. I just don't really see how there's not points here.
Yep, there'll definitely be tons of points there. You got to like this game. It's going to be one that we are going to get to. Next game up, and someone in the chat says that tell me not to stack Wake Forest and NC State. I mean, it's a 53.5 total. It's not like the last game we talked about, but it's definitely the next game we're going to talk about here. And we do have some injury concerns. McCall looks like he is not on the depth chart. So there's a quarterback issue there, which Bruce will give us the breakdown on what NC State's going to do with quarterback. And that could obviously change Conception's value at 6.7K. He could be a way worse play. And of course, he'll talk about Wake Forest as well. So Bruce, what is your thoughts on this injury situation with NC State? And should our boy in the chat, AQ Asaw, should he not stack this game?
Yeah, it's an interesting game for sure. The total came down like 2 points, but it's both teams don't play much defense, but they both are really slow, very slow teams. This should be one of the slower games on the slate. And if one team can run the football, that definitely affects the other side. So I don't love it for like a game stack, but we can't not talk about CJ Bailey here, taking over the quarterback spot from Grayson McCall. He's running the football well. He's a smaller guy, but he's really quick, and he has a good arm too. So he's going to be owned for sure at that price, 5,100. But he does have a ton of upside. He has good receivers. You can easily pair his receivers with him. If you look at KC Concepcion, he's 6,700, and he's just a stud. 10 targets per game. And this Wake Forest defense is terrible, so you have to have some interest there in stacking him with the receiver. Wake Forest, the running game, they're going to want to run the football here. Claiborne and Tate Carney are the two guys there, but I know Claiborne's been banged up, so if he misses, Carney at 3,800 is going to be a great play here because they're going to want to run the football with him, and he's a solid player. Jordan Waters and Kendrick Raphael have been splitting at running back. I wish one of them was getting more snaps, but it makes it tough to play. But they're both cheap, so if you get that lucky touchdown there, that could definitely get you a long way with the cheapness at running back there. Wide receiver for Wake Forest is rough. They kind of rotate a little bit, but Morin and Fields are the two guys. It looks like Donovan Green is going to miss. He's always been my favorite guy, but he's probably out this week. So tough to figure it out. But Morin, Fields, and Alexander are probably the three, and they're all cheap. So if you like the game enough and you think there's going to be a lot of scoring, those guys are solid. Jolly and Rogers are the two guys for NC State that I really like, other than KC here. But it's a solid game, but it could really be one of those games that's 21-20 or something at the end of the game, just because the pace is so slow.
Yeah, definitely not like a game to load up on, but a game with plays for sure. Bryce, any plays stick out to you here? It sounds like you like a lot of the earlier games. Do you like this one?
Not quite as much as some of the other ones. Bailey just kind of throttles the whole offense around him. I think he sucks. That being said, he's super cheap and he runs, so I think he's in consideration. If you're playing him in tournaments, I don't mind a Conception pairing, but in a vacuum, to me, Conception feels priced too highly for having Bailey as his quarterback, even against an atrocious Wake Forest defense. It's just kind of hard for me to spend up on him. I kind of prefer the Wake Forest receivers, to be honest. Morin would be my favorite, followed by Fields. Don't really want anything to do with Bachmeier. I would just much rather play Bailey here and, hope he runs a couple in. Running backs, I like the Carney call if Claiborne is out, and that's definitely dependent on Claiborne, so we should have that news tomorrow morning. NC State backfield's been kind of a mess. I know we were all pretty high on Waters to start the season. Coming into this, kind of thought it would be his backfield, but it's been super split, and I'm not really sure that's a situation that I'd want to deal with. If I had to choose, it'd be Waters here, but yeah.
All right. Let's go on to the next game. Purdue and Wisconsin, 44.5 total. I believe this is one of those catch me up games. I'm not buying into your Will Pauling crap this week, Bruce. I can't do it, but I don't know. Maybe it's a bounce back spot. I don't know. It's a lower total. It's 4.5K. So do we take the bait with Will Pauling, or are we just fading this one?
Yeah, it's an interesting game for sure. I think the main thing is that Purdue got rid of their offensive coordinator and elevated. I think it was their tight ends coach or analyst or something. And I'm not sure what direction they're going to go. I watched some old tape of him coaching in high school, and it was a lot of quick passes to the outside, which Purdue already does. So I'm not sure which direction they're going to go. The big news here is Ches Malusi is out. He's taking some time away from the team, so and he hasn't looked right. He got injured at the end of last year, so should see a lot of Tawee Walker at running back, and he's 5,100 against a bad rush defense. I know they stopped Nebraska last week, but it's mainly due to them saying, we want the quarterback to beat us here, which they could do in this game as well with Braden Locke in there. But I think these receivers, Pauling and Anthony, can get open and cause some issues for this man defense that Purdue runs. Pauling is one of the better route runners in the league. So, if you're matching them up 1v1 here, I think you can get open. Just depends on the quarterback to get him the football. So I think he's interesting for 4,500, too cheap. I think he's a good play. Claire as well at 3,700 for Purdue is decent. But yeah, I think it's Walker and maybe some Pauling here. Don't love the quarterbacks, even though they're so cheap. The game's mostly gonna be bad, but Purdue is a bad defense, so you can always attack that, and I like Walker a lot here.
Yeah, Bruce just said he's watching tight ends coaches high school coaching film. So if that's not worth the like and watching this show, I don't know what is. But he's the one who does our projections over here at Run Pure. If you don't know that, Bryce, I'll go over to you. We got the chat talking about Tyree Chalk, and Bruce obviously likes him a little bit. Is he going to be a chalky play with there being so many good running back plays on this slate?
Absolutely going to be chalk. He's too cheap without Malusi. I mean, he should be like what, 1,000 to 2,000 higher at a minimum. I'm not entirely sure that Wisconsin gives him an insane amount of work compared to like the backs that they have in the past. But, I think he's a really solid running back. And even if like he doesn't get the massive share that we think that he does, it's still a good matchup. At home against Purdue is about as good as it gets. We were all over the Nebraska run game last week, and, Dowdle kind of let us down there, but, I'm more than willing to go back to the well with Walker here. He's one of the better plays on the slate, in my opinion. Pauling, I think, is fine for cheap. I'd be okay playing him with Walker here. Don't want anything to do with Purdue, and those are really the only two plays for me here. It's just Purdue's so bad that I don't want anything to do with them. And, I think there's no need to like play Wisconsin quarterbacks or like look deep in the weeds for other Wisconsin plays here. I think it's just kind of play those two guys and move on.
All right, well, let's go from a 44.5 total to a 46.5 total. I mean, UCLA and Penn State, this game is definitely not one I'm going to love. Obviously, the Penn State running backs can always pop. Another thing to call out, I don't think we expected TJ Harden to be this bad this year, but he's 4.5K now. 4.5K is just super cheap. So, I mean, there's plays in this game, but I don't know. With it being such a good fantasy slate, I don't know how much I can get here. But Bruce, why don't you break this one down? Because I think it's a tricky one to navigate.
Yeah, I think the problem with this game is that UCLA has been so up and down. The one thing you do know about UCLA is they're going to throw the football. 63% of the time they've been throwing the ball this year, mostly because they've been behind and they've been starting so slow. But on the other side, Penn State is going to run the football. 64% of the time run is called. And both offenses have been super slow. So yeah, I just don't love this game. I could, like you said, I could see playing some Singleton and Allen. The offensive line for UCLA has been terrible. And while on the other side, Penn State's defensive line has been so good. So it's tough for me to play those guys. I could see Garber's getting hurt here in the first quarter because, oh, man, watching them play Illinois last week, the quarterback for Illinois was just getting destroyed every drop back. They just blitzed him and blitzed him and blitzed him. So, if UCLA didn't have a running game, they're going to get the quarterback killed here. It's going to be rough. Tyler Warren is one of the plays that I like here. 5,600. They get him the ball so much. Had 7 targets last week. NFL tight end guy. So I have a little bit of interest there in tournaments. But yeah, on the UCLA side, no interest at all. I just think they have issues here against this Penn State defense.
All right, let's go to you, Bryce. 46.5 total. I think this is a game you fade, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I mean, if Singleton's banged up, I don't mind the Allen play at all here at 5.8K. We all know how much Penn State likes to run the ball, and I could see Franklin giving him 20, 25 touches here. If Singleton is banged up, so I much prefer him to Singleton if choosing between Penn State running backs. He's cheaper. I don't think this is a game that they struggle in whatsoever. So kind of a get healthy spot for Singleton, in my opinion. Don't want anything to do with Aller. I am going to go to him as a tournament play later in the year. I just don't think that this is the spot to do it. I think they handle UCLA pretty easily here. Warren would be like my upside guy. If you didn't want to play him, I agree with Bruce on that. And yeah, not much to like outside of those guys. And I want nothing to do with UCLA in this spot. They're going to get their shit stomped.
All right. Next game up is Auburn and Georgia, which that's 51.5 total. I mean, obviously last week, that game went absolutely nuclear. I don't expect Auburn to be able to do that, to even keep it going. And so Georgia will probably just run the ball and stay ahead. Obviously, ETN could be very intriguing then. Hunter, I know, has been a solid option this year, but this is not a good matchup for him. Bruce, I'll kick it over to you. I assume we're not playing a lot in this game, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this SEC game will be a showdown.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Georgia plays well here. Probably pissed off, after last week. So, not a ton here that I like. I think, like you said, ATN is a solid play if they're able to run the football. Maybe he gets a couple touchdowns. I could see him being a little popular at this price point, just because Georgia doesn't have a ton of running backs left. He played 64% of the snaps last week. So he's interesting there. The problem is that the pass game is all priced up. Lovett's 6K, Arian Smith is 55, Dylan Bell's 5,700. It's tough to play those guys. When the game is kind of going to be one-sided here, and it is slower. So don't have a ton of interest there, but maybe one of those guys pops off. But yeah, it's mostly a fade for me. Might have a Georgia or a guy or two there in tournaments.
All right, Bryce, Auburn, Georgia. Any takeaways here that are interesting in fantasy?
One of the easiest games to cut, in my opinion. If you want to take a shot on a Georgia guy, Lovett, Bell, Smith, ETN, max 1 in my 150. Get a couple % on those guys, but that's about as deep as I'm going into this game. I want absolutely nothing to do with Auburn. They're atrocious. As Bruce said, they're going to face a pissed off Georgia defense here on the road. It just seems like an absolute train wreck to me. Georgia spreads the ball around so much. I mean, it's the same story as it's been with them for years. That even this season, it's even harder to play them because they don't have a Brock Bowers that you can turn to if you really do want to play some Georgia. So I normally fade Georgia, and I'm going to continue to here.
All right, we'll go from one pissed off SEC team to another. We'll go to Ole Miss, who, Wiley and company were burning the couches in the streets there in Kentucky, going against South Carolina. It's a 54.5 total. maybe Ole Miss pours it on. And if they do, they got Jackson Dart, which obviously he could have a big game. We got questionable tag on Parrish here, so there could be some value with our running backs. We, of course, got Rocket Sanders at 5K, which that's a cheap price tag for him, so he's intriguing. We saw Trey Harris last week. I mean, he had a massive game. I don't know if he was on the winner, but 36 DK points. He certainly could do that here in this matchup as well. So there's a lot of plays to discuss. We even got Mr. Goggles on the slate. I assume he'll play in this game. I don't know if Ashford's terrible. I don't think he stole the job. But Bruce, are we getting Goggles or are we getting Ashford back there? And what's your thoughts?
Yeah, Sellers should be back. I think he was probable last I saw. So, and they're off a bye week too, so he should be good to go. I think he should be ready. I know Rocket Sanders was questionable, but he is probable now, so he should be good to go there. If Parrish doesn't go, Matt Jones for 3,500 is interesting. I know Trey Harris was questionable last I saw. I haven't checked today. If he misses, Juice Wells and Watkins would be solid plays. But this game could get to a point where it shoots out. If it is at South Carolina, so maybe Sellers plays a good game. I thought he looked great before he got injured in their previous game. So he's a good running quarterback. The problem is that South Carolina loves to run the football, so they could slow it down a little bit. Ole Miss is one of the faster teams in the country. So, if Ole Miss jumps out to a little bit of a lead here, this game could get to a point where it gets a lot more fun. I think Dart's in play. You can pair him with the receiver. Harris is definitely the most attractive if he's good to go. He got 15 targets against Kentucky, and then Juice Wells got 2, and Jordan Watkins got 1. That's crazy to me. But it could change, especially if Harris is banged up. Tough to play any of these South Carolina receivers, but if you do, I guess Jared Brown's the guy. He's interesting. Just South Carolina loves to run the football, so if the game's close, they're going to run Sanders a ton, and I think he's a solid play. Ole Miss struggled a little bit against Kentucky's run, and that could happen again here as it is at South Carolina. So I think you can keep him in your pool for sure.
All right. Definitely a game to be in the Discord chat about, right? If you're in that Discord chat, you'll get all the injury updates. We'll talk about everything in the morning. And fingers crossed, Bruce. We haven't had a lot of helmet holding so far. I feel like we're getting to that part of the year. I'm not trying to will it to existence, but we haven't had that much of it so far. But let's go over to you, Bryce. Rocket Sanders, is he one of those running backs you like? You love this slate, you said, for running backs. There's a lot that you're going to get to. Is he one of the options, and what are you doing with this game?
I think he's a really good tournament option. I think there's better options in cash here. If you think the game stays close, Sanders is a much better play. If you like Mississippi here, I would just fade South Carolina as a whole, because if they do have success, it's going to be on the ground. I don't really see them keeping this game close through the air here against Jackson Dart. So Goggles and the rest of the South Carolina receivers are pretty much a fade to me. The one play for me would be Sanders. Ole Miss, I think Dart is kind of interesting in tournaments. Absolutely nobody's going to click on him at 9.9K. And, we do have some value if you wanted to play him and Harris stack to get super different. Dart is certainly not a cash play, so you definitely won't see him in there for me. Parrish at 6.9K is somewhat interesting if he plays here, but, with him being questionable and whatnot, it's a little hard to analyze that situation for y'all here. But
looks like he's probable.
Okay. So, that pretty much takes Matt Jones out of the equation for me. But, there's been crazier stuff in college. Lane Kiffin could easily say he's probable and then just have him not really play much. You kind of have to wait for the pregame on this stuff. It seems like he's being a little shady with his injury reporting. How many other teams list this many players as probable? It seems a little sketchy to me, but that's Lane Kiffin for you. So, I wouldn't be that hesitant playing these guys. People hate playing guys with P's next to their name here in college. It's like having a questionable or doubtful sign in the NBA. People just don't like to click on them. So, little note there. Trey Harris, I mean, the guy's an absolute stud. I mean, if he's 100% in this game, he's wide receiver 1 on the slate pretty easily. But, it's hard to tell with Lane Kiffin's probable BS. That's stuff that, hopefully we get some clarity on tomorrow. If he were to miss, I think Watkins and Wells would be very solid plays here for cheap. But yeah, it's kind of dependent on what you think of Lane Kiffin's injury reporting here, and hopefully we get some clarity before the game.
Yep, we'll have to wait for that clarity again. More reasons to be in the Discord chat for sure. Definitely a game that we're going to monitor that news. Let's go over to the next game. Virginia Tech and Stanford, 49.5 total. So I'm sure our guy Steve Boyton, he's excited to watch his boys take on Stanford. Stanford, I'm not scared of their defense at all. This does feel like kind of a low total. I feel like points will be put up here, Bruce, but give me your overall thoughts on Virginia Tech and Stanford.
Yeah, I think Stanford's defense has actually been sneaky good. Just looking by the numbers, and they went into Syracuse and beat them as well. I don't think Syracuse has the best offense in college football, but they've looked a lot better than I thought they would. Like their rush defense has been really good. Defensive line stats look great. They're holding opposing running backs to under 10 points per game, which is really good. So I think it's tough to play some of these Virginia Tech guys on the road here. I know Stanford's not like a huge home field advantage, but it's an interesting defensive team. So I think Drones is probably the guy that I would look at here. He is priced up, but Stanford does run a lot of man defense on the edges. So I think Drones could run for some yards here. He did look good against Miami last week too. So maybe he's turning a corner because he hadn't looked good up until that point. And if the cornerbacks have their back to the quarterback, he can get some extra yards there and possibly score a touchdown or 2 on the ground. So I think he's interesting. Tootin's always going to be a good play just because he has kind of been matchup proof. I thought he'd have some trouble against Miami's front, but he looked great. So he's in play. Micah Ford at 4,100 against a pretty bad Virginia Tech defense, rush defense. It's given up 24 points per game to running backs this year. I think he's a good play as he's going to start and get most of the carries there. Wide receiver, I think Emmett Mosley, 4,700. First game back from injury last week. He had a lot of buzz coming into the year, and it was his first game. So he had 8 targets, and he kind of looks like the real deal. So I think he's interesting at home. A.O. Maynor, I don't know how to say his name. That's hard to say. 6,400, and gets all the snaps. Just a stud on the corners, on the edge there. I think he's a big guy, so I think he's in play for sure. But yeah, other than that, I don't really love this game. I think drones and tournaments is probably the main play for me.
Yeah, it's definitely not a game like to load the boat on, but I think there's plays here and there for sure. And you mentioned the receiver for Stanford. I know he had like that massive game against Colorado last year. He's clearly shown upside. So there's plays you can play, I think, in tournaments. Bryce, I'll head on over to you. It's only a 49.5 total, but I think there's some plays here. What about you?
Yeah, I think Tootin's a really good play. If you're struggling to find some running backs here, I mean, the guy gets insane volume. He scores touchdowns every game, gets 100 yards every game. I mean, he scored over 23 in every game this year. While it's not the best total, I don't think his volume can really be overlooked here. Him and Drones are kind of the guys for me in this game. I would definitely not play Tootin and Drones together. That's a super negatively correlated play. Drones is atrocious and relies on his legs to get there. He's kind of like a really shitty version of Jalen Hurts if you haven't seen him play without the tush push. So, yeah, I don't mind drones in tournaments. I think Tootin's good in tournaments or cash. If you want to run it back, A.O. Maynor is definitely my favorite play on Stanford and probably the only guy that I'd get exposure to on their side of the ball. their backfield's a mess. I don't want anything to do with it. Quarterbacks, a hard pass for me. But Ayo Manor, I'm kind of surprised he hasn't had a bigger year. I'm a pretty firm believer in his talent. While it's not the best point scoring environment here, I think he works fine as a run back or even on his own.
All right, we'll go to the next one up, which is the Ohio State University versus Iowa. And Iowa's put up more points than they have in past seasons. The offense is clearly improved. You got Jeremiah Smith at 7.7K. Definitely someone who could just break any slate. He's absolutely amazing. Egbuka, 6.8K. You got Judkins. He's at 7.7, which is definitely pricey with that split situation for sure. We do have, I want to mention Caleb Johnson because Caleb Johnson's awesome. His games have been absolutely crazy. 28, 37, 34, and 43 DK points. But this is not the matchup to play Caleb Johnson. Let's wait a week or two. Don't think you need to play him here. But maybe I'm wrong, Bruce. It's a good running back week. I doubt he's an option, but what's your thoughts here?
Yeah, it's a tough matchup at Ohio State. I think if it was at Iowa, I might have a little bit, just because, I've watched this Ohio State defense and I've had a little bit. I kind of think that they're a little overrated. I forgot who they played. Marshall, I think. Before their quarterback got hurt, he was moving the ball up and down the field on them. He was 16 for 21 passing, and then got banged up, and it wasn't the same after that. But I think teams can move the football in Ohio State. I just don't know if it's Iowa, because I think you can kind of make them one-dimensional with the quarterback issues. Cade McNamara hasn't looked great. Yeah, I think in tournaments you could play him just because he's going to get 21 carries. I feel like that's kind of like a big T play. I think he would possibly look at a guy like that. He's going to get 21 carries. Probably get a couple targets as well. I don't mind him in tournaments, even though he's priced up there. Just because I'm not a big believer in this Ohio State defense yet. I think they need to show it to me a little bit more. If McNamara is able to move the ball in the air, I think they can kind of hang with them a little bit at least. And Caleb Johnson's been elite. He has a couple 200-yard games, and he looks the part for sure. These Ohio State receivers are always in play. Smith and Egbuka, they're priced up, but Iowa's defense hasn't looked great either. They gave up a lot of points to man, I forgot what team it was, but I was looking at it the other day, and they looked horrible. It was Troy. we had Troy on the slate last night, and they gave up 21 points to Troy. So, that's pretty terrible. So I think these Ohio State guys are going to put up some points. Judkins can do it for sure. 7,700 is pricey, but he's a stud, and Ohio State's offensive line is great. So I have some interest there in tournaments with Judkins, and the quarterback Will Howard, 7,500 is too cheap, and he runs too. So he may have a big game there on the ground too.
Man, I feel like you talked way too long about Ohio State, Iowa.
Yeah,
that's what we love.
Yeah,
you got all the takes on every players, even in the bad games, even in the academy games. You'll give it to us all, which we love to hear. So, Bryce, do you have a lot of interest in this game? We talked about Johnson a little bit. We talked about Jeremiah Smith too. I mean, he's an absolute monster. There seem like some interesting spends that are just going to be low owned, but I don't know. They seem tough to play on this slate.
Yeah, I mean, like Marvin Harrison last year, smashed so many slates at 0% ownership because he was so expensive. I'm not saying that Jeremiah Smith is Marvin Harrison, but you also get a price discount on him here at 7.6K compared to what Marvin was priced at last year. I think he's the upside play in this game. This is just your classic Big Ten fade spot to me. Just shit game. I mean, I can't believe that they gave up 21 points to Iowa though, or to Iowa gave up to Troy. I watched that whole Troy game last night, and it was just Troy is so bad. If they're scoring on you, Smith could easily take the top off for a couple touchdowns here. He's by far my favorite play in the game. Ohio State backfield's kind of messy to me. I wouldn't mind taking shots on Judkins in tournaments. I think he can get there in pretty much any matchup in this offense. So I kind of like taking like a one-off Ohio State in this game if you do want to play it. I don't want anything to do with Iowa.
Hey, you talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. and how he could smash. I think Jeremiah Smith might be better than Marvin Harrison Jr. I know it's early, but Geno Smith apparently thinks so. It is his cousin though. He's biased, but he's looked like an absolute monster. Like he's looked like the best receiver I feel like I've ever seen in college. But it's early. We'll have to see. Sure, he's going to be a good play every single week. Let's head on over to the next game. We got West Virginia. We got Oklahoma State, and definitely an interesting game here. I'm pulling up the total now. It is 64.5. So yeah, I didn't know if it was going to be that high. I knew it'd be good, but it's high. It's obviously as high as the Pitt and North Carolina one. So this will be one of the games that we're going to talk about, and it's in the late window, right? Starting at 4:00. Got Garrett Green, 8K. He had a pretty good week last week, right? 32.5 DK points. Then you got Bowman, who, man, Oklahoma State, they definitely put up an egg last week. They kind of quit at the end. I expect them to be able to bounce back pretty well. Presley is 7.4. Stribling, he used to be in the 4Ks. Now he's up to 6.1. So curious what you guys think of that price tag, if he's worth still being the buyer of all the receivers there. Rashad Owens, 4.8K. Definitely someone else to discuss. West Virginia, I never really discussed their receivers. Maybe Bruce has some receivers to discuss for them that are intriguing. And of course, we got the mystery of Ollie Gordon, who we've talked about every single week, and he just has not paid off his tag since week 1. He's 9K. Will be under-owned again, like we've talked about the past couple of weeks. Bruce, break this game down because it's clearly a good one.
Yeah, I don't think Ollie is looking healthy to me. He keeps getting pulled, and 9K is just tough to pay that until you see it. But yeah, Garrett Green is up there with as one of the best quarterback plays on the slate this week. Just because Oklahoma State's defense has been terrible. They've been giving up so many big plays. Kansas State did it to them last week. It was Avery Johnson over and over. Give up 187 rushing yards to Giddens. I think, that's anybody on the West Virginia side is in play here, just because this Oklahoma State defense is tough. I think they're terrible. So I'll probably have a good amount of Garrett Green at 8K. He's too cheap. I think he should be in that 9K range. I think CJ Donaldson is interesting at 5,200. He's getting double-digit carries here and has 3 touchdowns rushing as well. So he's in play for me. Stribling, you mentioned he is priced up a little bit more, but he just looks good. Last week they timed he was timed as the fastest the fastest player in college football. I think he had like a 22 mile an hour speed on one of his catches. So I definitely like him. He's a big dude and he's fast. So we love to see that, especially if they're trailing. We don't love Bowman, but West Virginia's been giving up tons of explosive pass plays. They're actually worst on the slate in giving up explosive pass plays. So I like these Oklahoma State receivers, Stribling, Presley, and Owens and Shetron have been rotating. Shetron's 3,400, and he's way too cheap in my opinion. Hudson Clement was Garrett Green's favorite receiver in their last game. And he's only 4,100. I think he's okay. Jaden Bray is actually an ex-Oklahoma State receiver, and he is 3,500 and should get a ton of snaps too. So I think he's interesting at that price point as well. But yeah, this game's gonna be good. I'll probably have a game stack or two in tournaments for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a good game, and the Shreton or whatever his name is. I watched that game a lot last week, so I was trying to root on Rashad Owens late, and he got a lot of work. He's definitely a value that should not be ignored and will be low owned in tournaments. And this will be a good game. And I don't know if I can allow you talking up CJ Donaldson that much, Bruce, but it's they can flip on a dime. But I get it. Those guys have upside at their price, so it's a fun week for sure. Bryce, I'll head on over to you. 64.5 total. Is this game better than the one we talked about before? We talked about possibly setting a rule of at least getting one of those guys. Would you do that in this game? And I know Stribling's a guy that you've talked about a lot. So talk about his price tag and what you're doing with him.
Yeah, Oklahoma State's been kind of a tough team to like break down for DFS purposes, just because like, you know, there's always Ollie looming, but like he's not a good play because you don't know how much he's going to play. So like, you know, he just takes so much away from other guys that like, I don't know. I've kind of been Stribling or bust for Oklahoma State this year. I'm just never a Bowman guy. I think he's atrocious and he's cheap. If he beats me, he beats me. Give me Shuck over him any day of the week here. Give me Green, who I think is the best quarterback play on the slate. AK runs. I have zero respect for this Oklahoma State defense. He's going to be high owned, but you know, if you want to get some leverage off him, you know, play Donaldson. You know, I think making a rule of at least one guy in this game is totally fine here. Green and Donaldson are my two favorite plays, followed closely by Stribling. I think that would be choose one of those two and pair them with Stribling. Kind of like just a small game stack here. Presley, you know, he continues to be priced too high for me. You know, 7.4K. He has a really good floor, but you know, at 7.4K, you know, you're not looking for, you know, 15 points. You're looking for like 30. You know, he's like their possession guy, catches a ton of balls around the line of scrimmage, you know, very, very solid floor play, but I'm just not sure that he has the upside at 7.4K here. Stribling's an absolute animal. You know, I've been playing him all season. You know, I was kicking myself for not playing him last week in cash just because, and he came in at like 4%, but I had a team I really liked with him. It was just kind of like the last 2v2s I was down to, and I ended up not going with him. So hopefully I don't make that same mistake again this week. You know, he's a good play. He's not like an unbelievable play or anything. You know, he's getting priced up a bit here, but you know, I think that he's their best receiver on the team personally. Owens, I think you can do. I mean, how do you say his last name? Shetron, I think is what you is how you said it. I think he's fine for cheap. Like if you want to get off like a super chalky Lacey, that's fine with me. You know, it's going to be kind of easy to talk me into playing pretty much anyone in this game here. West Virginia receivers, by far the hardest thing to break down in this game, in my opinion. I'm likely playing Green naked a lot, so that's pretty much how I'm going to attack this game.
Yeah, one thing I know I'll do, I'm not going to set a rule with Green, but like I definitely kind of scan my teams and say, okay, like, do I have Green with like a lot of these receivers? Because it's not necessary. Like, I don't need to do it. So I think that's a good point that you brought up there. Let's go to the next game. I do not have a total on it. It's Rutgers and Nebraska. I can never get Rutgers totals. They just never exist on the DraftKings Sportsbook and stuff. So it is. What is the total, Bruce? Do you know what it is?
It was 42.
Okay, I figured it wasn't great, but it's against AP and Snyder's Nebraska team, and didn't know if there'd be some viable plays. And Banks was definitely a hero for me last week. He was a really good value, and I know it's a low total, but at that price, if Banks is going to do what he did last week, I'm in again. I think it's a good price tag for someone of his talent. Again, I know it's not an ideal matchup, but you can't completely ignore it. Figuring out the Nebraska running back situation isn't fun. If you have to pick, it's Dowdle, but it's better just not to pick. I doubt you're spending the 8.1K on Kyle Monaghay. I don't think I want to play him. I just think there's better running backs on the slate to go to. And then, of course, we have, Mr. Pat Mahomes is 5.4K. We'll see if he pops a little bit. I know in your projections, Bruce, they pop a little bit more. So have you dialed that in a little bit? Or are we loading up on some Nebraska Rutgers?
Yeah, this game is just going to be bad. I just think it's going to be slow. There's, looking at the pace numbers, they look really bad. So mostly going to stay away. I love Monungai, but man, 8.1K in a slow game. It's against a good defense. It's tough to pay that. The two receivers for Nebraska are interesting, Nair and Banks. Their Banks at 3,800 is way too cheap. Got 6 targets last week. It was a stud at Wake Forest. Just a very, very athletic receiver. So a little interest there. I know Snyder was really talking up this Barney guy. 3,400, scored a rushing touchdown last week. So he's not bad. And Demir Miller for Rutgers, just getting a lot of targets, a little slot receiver. So he's a little interesting, but yeah, this game is going to be slow and pretty terrible. So and a lot of shared spots. 4-way rotation for Nebraska at running back. Rutgers rotates a ton at receiver. Just mostly want to stay away from it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Bryce, any interest in Banks for this game? It's definitely not a fun roster. It's one of the lowest totals on the slate, so I'm assuming you won't have too much interest.
I'm fine with like a super cheap guy in this game. I mean, I'm pretty much fine with any game environment for someone under 4K, like if they're a solid play. And I think Banks and Barney, not cash, but tournaments. I mean, they're giving him touches out of the backfield. He's like a little like scat back type of dude. I only know this because I was tilting watching Dowdle play last week. I want nothing to do with this Nebraska backfield. I feel super lucky I got a touchdown out of him last week. Matt Rule's just super fucking annoying. Rutgers, as great as Monungai's volume is, like he falls into like the Johnson, Iowa type of deal for me. I just don't want anything to do with them. I think there's like, give me Tootin over those guys any day. So as far as like the volume backs go, I would rather play Johnson than Monungai here. I don't want anything to do with Rutgers and Nebraska. Banks, Barney one-offs, maybe a Nair one-off. Like I wouldn't take him out of my pool entirely, but like probably max one of those guys. I don't really see two getting there. It's a super ugly game.
All right, TJ, Big T will have his content up. It'll be in the playbook. He got stuck doing some like hockey BS. So, the hockey season starting up. He had to help navigate some stuff with that. So sometimes stuff comes up when all the sports are going on. It gets crazy. And, Big T needs to be in there. So he's also doing the print factor right now. But he'll be in the Discord chat. He'll have his content up for you. So don't worry. If you're a member, you can check that out. And, of course, you can check out the free stuff he's going to do. He'll be on the Wood Show on Sunday as well. So if you want your Big T, you'll get it. And he's even doing Showdown at MLB stuff. So tons of sports are going on. But let's shift on over to this final game. So I am a Diego Pavia truther, but I don't think I can back him in this spot. This is not the easiest matchup here against Bama. I don't think I can spend the money on Milroe at 10-4. It just doesn't feel like the right slate to, because if you play, like I've noticed whenever I played Shadir Sanders, my teams are just like significantly gross all around. If you do play a Jalen Milroe, you're going to have a lot of cheap receivers in your lineup to be able to get some of these good running back options. Ryan Williams, who, man, he had one of the sickest plays I've seen, it feels like, in a very long time. Amazing play from him. He's 7.3K. It just feels like stuff is priced up too much in this game because, again, we just had a big game against Georgia. I'm sure Vandy can't push him that much. So really no interest, I think, in this game. I don't know, Bruce. Maybe I'm wrong, though. What's your thoughts here?
Yeah, I want to have some interest in Pavia, man, because I know you love him. I love him too. He's just so much fun. He runs and he's just 17
Bruce, look at his rushing. Bruce, look at his rushing game logs, right? Like, and if you're a viewer, look at the game logs. Like, he's going to be trailing all game. How could he not get there?
Yeah, and he's under 70K.
He loses 80 yards and taking sacks.
Yeah,
that is it. I also saw the fumbles. He might fumble twice, but it's maybe this isn't the matchup, but it's the opportunity's there. But Bruce, continue. Sorry for cutting you off.
Oh no, you're good. I love him, but yeah, it's probably not the spot for him. He's actually been passing the football well this year when he does throw it, so maybe he gets there through the air. Who knows? But yeah, it's a tough spot for him. I think Milroe has a game. Running backs could have a game as well. Just tough to choose between Haynes and Miller. I always think Miller looks the best, but they rotate. They kind of split carries there. So tough to choose between those two when they're priced up to 63 and 6K. But one of them could get there and smash. Who knows? But Ryan Williams, 7,300, such a stud, playing all the snaps. And then Jeremy Bernard also at 5K. Played every snap last week too. And love those two guys. So in tournaments for sure, they should be lower owned. I don't think anybody's playing Ryan Williams. Bernard should have some ownership. On the Vandy side, Eli Stowers at 4K. He's a ex-A&M quarterback, I believe. Went to New Mexico State at some point, but now a tight end. He's 4K. Got he's getting 37% target share there in a game that they should be trailing. So should get some ownership there. Too cheap for him, in my opinion. But yeah, just maybe mix a guy or two from this game. I love Milrow, even though he is priced up. Should be enough value to get him in there.
Yeah, I think there's value to get him in there, but I don't know. I mean, quarterback has been kind of brutal this year, but I don't know, Bryce. Maybe you're saving the salary up for Milrow, or it could be Jackson Dart instead. Is Milrow the best spend, and are you spending on him, Bryce?
He's a little harder to get to in cash than tournaments, but I mean, I find myself like looking at my quarterback scores every week, like outside of like Avery Johnson, and been like, man, I really thought this guy was going to give me like another like 15 points at least. And, there just haven't been tons of the great ones on the main slate. There's not as many runners this year. I think is pretty much it. But I mean, Milrow's basically a running back playing quarterback. I mean, I'm sure all you guys saw his game last week. I don't think they lean off him in the spot. I think it's kind of impossible to in their offense. I kind of expected Bama to be bigger than 22-point favorites here, to be honest. I think if the game stays close and, 22 points is like, it's not like total blowout. Like Milrow's not sitting unless they're up 5 touchdowns. So, I think it's a decent spot for him. I think it's a little harder to play someone like Williams, even though I absolutely love him here, than Milrow. There's just so many ways that he can get there. You do make sacrifices to get him, but I mean, he easily has the highest floor and upside on this slate in terms of raw score of anyone. So I think he's impossible to ignore. Don't really want anything to do with Bama outside of him and Williams. And then Vandy's a fade for me here. Could see like a little bit of a Bama letdown spot after that massive win last week. But yeah, it's tough when these crappy teams play overmatched teams. It's like I'm kind of looking for cheap receivers and like good passing offenses, and that's kind of it. They just don't see tons of the ball, and even if you're like looking to play like a running quarterback, like he can easily lose, or doesn't have to be a runner. Like the quarterback can easily lose you like 5 to 10 points in taking sacks alone. So, just kind of a pass for me from Vandy here.
All right. That's basically it for the slate. Not much else to mention here with these games. Wrapped it up. A lot of good games though for fantasy for sure. We'll go to plays of the day. Bruce, we'll go to you first. Are you ready for your play of the day?
Yeah, I'm going to go Eli Holstein for 9K. I just think it's a good spot for him. It is on the road, but I think he has a big game. Been so bad on these plays of the day, and just hoping for a good one here. I think 300 yards passing, maybe 50 yards rushing, a couple rushing touchdowns would be great.
Yeah, I said this on Twitter, Bruce. Go bet Ashton Janty at minus 4,000 to score a touchdown. Just get one through the chamber. Bet just give us the easiest play of the slate. Get one through the chamber, and we'll go back to next week. You got to see one go through. At some point.
Luck, he would not score. That's how it's going for me right now.
I didn't even look to see who Boise played, but I just laughed. Minus 4,000 to score a touchdown is absolutely crazy. But we'll go to you, Bryce. So who do you got? Who is your play of the day?
I'd probably bet the no on Ginty. I mean,
I'm sure they don't.
He didn't do it. He didn't do it week 1, or there was one of these weeks that he didn't do it.
My guess is they don't offer it. These sites, they don't want to offer the no anymore. There's no way.
They started offering it in NFL at least. I always look at Pinnacle for player props. If you actually want like a good, they don't do college, but for pros, like they offer no on all the bets. So, always look for a two-way market when you're looking at stuff. Much better estimation of fair market value. In terms of play of the day. I mean, I don't see how Lacey doesn't smash here for 3.4K. He's just kind of a free square to me. Yeah.
All right. Lacey it is. I'm going with I'll go with the tournament play. At least I don't think he's going to be owned. He seems cheap. He's $5,000. We'll go with Rocket Sanders. Rocket Sanders, interesting contrarian running back that gets you 20 plus DK points and can get you to the winner's circle. But like we said, tons of content for you guys. 4-game slate tonight. Bruce has the breakdown for that. Bruce, why don't you just give a quick rundown? I know there's two. It feels like there's 2 good games and 2 bad games. That's at least what I noticed when I kind of scanned it. Maybe I'm wrong, but give us a quick breakdown on this slate.
Yeah, this is man, it's a fun slate. At least we got TCU on the slate against Houston. Houston hasn't scored a point in like 9 quarters, so TCU's defense has struggled this year. So it'll be fun to see if Houston can move the ball and score a little bit. And then we have Oregon playing Michigan State. Oregon should roll there at home. Dylan Gabriel and the guys. Running back is kind of weak on the slate. James and the Quentin Allen are probably the top 2 options, along with Trey Stewart there. And then you have Syracuse and UNLV taking on the new quarterback for UNLV, Malik Williams, who played really well last week. And Ricky White, had a huge game too, and he's priced up. So I'm gonna go ahead and lock Besh and White there probably tonight, and try and fill in the rest, because those 2 guys are just great players in my opinion. I love watching both of those guys, and we have our guy McAllister on the slate too, who smashed for us last week.
Yeah, Bruce, you loved Besh last week, and he was pretty low owned, and so give yourself some credit. I mean, you got me on him, so you definitely crushed with talking about him and talking him up, and he did me good. So I'll definitely be playing some Besh tonight. Bryce, you got any quick thoughts on this night slate?
I really haven't had time to look at it today, so I'll have the cash plays up on the site in a bit here, and on short slates, I pretty much just not like chalk jam, but I play the cash plays heavier just because they're the best plays on the slate, and then you can get different elsewhere. Just throwing up the uniques and whatnot.
Yeah, that's how we got there last night. We played chalk, and we had a 4% owned McKinney who was 3,400 backup running back and just went nuts. So
that's all you need. Short slates. On a 4-game slate, all you need is especially in college, if you have that one guy that goes nuts for cheap. That's all you need, and you surround him with the best plays on the slate. The lineup's just gonna full smash every time.
Yep, for sure. And Bruce, are they really still starting Donovan Smith? He's still a starter.
Yeah, they're gonna rotate between Smith and a running quarterback who I like better. Zion Chris, I think is his name. Sounds like a fake name, but
I kind of like the over in this game tonight because I'm a sicko. TCU's defense is so bad. So really bad.
Have you watched Donovan Smith play football though?
Yeah, I've watched him for years play.
Just
I hope they play this backup more. I never liked playing the rotating quarterback, but I mean, TCU could get 50 on their own here.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, we got the playbook up. We'll have the tags and everything for you guys, so be sure to check all that out. Me and Bryce got to go do the cash game show for NFL, so we'll be over there. Bruce will be giving you the winners on the college football playbook, so thanks a lot for joining us here. And, of course, Big T, if you're looking for him, he's doing the Print Factor right now. He'll have all of his content up for you guys, so be sure to check that out on the college football side. But for me, Mango, Bruce, and Bryce, we'll see you guys later.